Hi everyone, this is the Murali Pod and my name is Estelle Vasudevan. Today I'm taking over the hosting duties because unfortunately Mark has been struck down by COVID. He's not feeling that great. I don't think he's feeling much better after the game we just watched. Recording this episode just about 15 minutes after Sri Lanka lost to Pakistan in Hyderabad. So the mood's not good. Um, Anyway, he's not with us. He will probably be with us in the next episode. We've got a lot to get through today. I have Dominic Machado and Nick Brookes with me as well. Before we get started, though, just to remind you guys, don't forget to subscribe to the Murali Pod. And also, we've got a new newsletter out. We've got some stuff written by Nick and Dom in the first ever newsletter we sent out last week. We'll be planning to do it every week. So please subscribe. All the links will be on our Twitter handle. You can go there, check all the links to the podcast and the newsletter out. Don't forget to subscribe and also share it with whoever you think would be interested in Sri Lanka cricket at the World Cup. And of course, a lot of coverage for the women's team and also the A sides as well. Okay, so 15 minutes after the game's done, not the best. I mean, I think we can agree that it wasn't the best game to watch as a Sri Lankan fan. Dom, you want to give us a bit of a rundown on that performance?
Yeah, I'll start with the back end of it, and I think when Kusal Mendes got out, over 30, I'm thinking, okay, these last 20 overs are going to be really important because it looks a good pitch, it looks good to bat on. Can we kick on? And a good team would be looking to get 400 there, but we were thinking, okay, get 370, we'll feel relatively okay. And then just watching that second half of the chase and knowing that there were no good options to go to, or maybe the one good option to go to wasn't being used correctly. You were kind of watching a crash in slow motion, hoping that it would stop, hoping that something miraculous would happen. But nothing of the sort came. I feel a little bit bad for the youngsters. They're putting Patirana in such a difficult position to bowl those overs, and asking him to deliver in such a pressure situation, to adapt to a new format of the game that he's never really played before. But what a disappointing loss from Sri Lanka. When we started our a few hours ago, we were all feeling high watching some brilliant batting from Mendes and Sadira, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But right now, can't help but feel a little bit low about that loss.
Yeah, just on Matisha Patirana, 20 years old. He hasn't played that much international cricket. Basically, he's been pushed into ODI cricket because of the injuries, right? What should Sri Lanka do with him now? I mean, he's gone for 90 in this game, went for, I think, 9 or 8 runs and over in the previous game against South Africa as well. Nick, how do they handle this? Have you seen this kind of thing in the past where you're bringing in a young guy straight into a World Cup after maybe 3, 4 games in international cricket? How do they go about things?
I think there's no doubt at this stage, after two really difficult showings for Patirana, that they have to take him out of the firing line and they have to bring in Lahiru Kumara. It's a strange one because, I mean, we've seen him bowl the last over for CSK. We've seen him in pressure situations before, handling it fine. And I wonder whether the sort of physical toll of bowling 10 overs time and again is kind of putting a strain on his body, and he's struggling, because I really can't remember seeing him lose his radar so regularly as he has done over these last couple of games. And I mean, we saw it with Malinga early in his career, that bowling with that super slingy style, he had to put on more muscle to bowl more accurately. And I wonder if we're seeing the same thing with Patirana, and that just asking him to bowl 10 over spells 3 days apart with travel is too much for him at this stage in his career, because he's super slight, pretty inexperienced. And I mean, it sucks, doesn't it? It hurts, I think, for all of us as fans, because I certainly have been so excited about his bowling for the last 2 years. Really excited to see what he could do on this stage, and the fact that he's getting to kind of showcase his skills to a broader audience, people who don't watch the IPL, cricket fans in England and Australia. And so to see it kind of blow up in his face hurts, I think, for all of us. And yeah, but I do think that Kumara would be my pick for the Australia game.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, isn't it? Like you get so many when you have a guy as unique as Lasith Malinga, you get so many kind of lookalikes and kids trying to copy that style. You see so much of it. It's almost as if people think just it's purely the action that gives him that advantage in cricket. But the control Malinga had, and like you rightly mentioned, earlier in his career, he also did have issues with control. It seems like Matisha is struggling with the same, because it's almost a given now that in every game there's going to be at least a couple of wides that maybe go to the boundary. Disappointing, but you have to kind of empathize with him, right? He's a kid. He's only 20 years old, and he hasn't the fact is he hasn't played ODI cricket at all until maybe a couple of months before the World Cup. Not easy coming straight in. Just on the bowling attack, Dom, Sri Lanka going into this tournament know that they've got to get 10 overs out of Dhananjaya De Silva, Dasun Shanaka, maybe a bit of Charith Asalanka. You think that's a realistic expectation on tracks like this, where it's even for the regular bowlers, it's really tough going?
Yeah, and I think in addition to saying, okay, can we get 10 good overs off of DDS and Charith and Shanaka? And yeah, there were a couple captaincy questions that I had. I thought the bowler who looked best out of the three of them was Shanaka, and I thought his cutters could have been a good way to keep the scoring rate down a little bit during those middle overs when DDS got blasted for 8-9 runs and over. I thought he had bowled pretty well. Maybe it's because of the tennis elbow. He doesn't feel comfortable bowling a full allotment of overs. I think the other bit is it seemed like Shanaka wanted to get through those overs as quickly as possible early on in the match. And there were some times where maybe we could have put a bit more pressure on. We could have brought on Tikshana a bit earlier, right? Especially when Rizwan was physically struggling. Keep him on strike, make him fight for singles. And they kind of let the pressure off there. And I was a bit surprised by the way Shanaka captained through those bowling changes. And I think that's one area where captaincy kind of let us down a bit today. How do we use that fifth bowler or that fifth, sixth, seventh bowler? And I think, as you said, Estelle, on these tracks, it's really hard to bowl if you're a spin bowler that's not getting spin. And especially if you're a part-timer, you're just asking to be launched out of the ground, which is what happened to DDS. If you're playing in Sri Lanka where you're getting grip and turn, sure, but not on these tracks. And I think we're learning that lesson too late. I think one thing we've talked about a lot was in preparing for a World Cup where we know roughly about 350 is going to be a par score. We were still comfortable with kind of making these low, slow pitches at home and winning matches that way, rather than saying, okay, how do we build a lineup and a bowling lineup that can bowl on pitches that are tough to bowl on? And I think there we saw a little bit of difference. Pakistan was able to reel it in at the end. Those 5 good last final overs that they had were kind of the difference in the game at the end of the day. Shasheen Shah Afridi was great in those last few overs, and that made a difference in the match today.
Yeah, I think just looking at the end of it seemed like, the Pakistani bowlers were good, but Sri Lanka's lower middle order just is not firing at all, is it? I mean, we spoke about Dhananjaya De Silva as, that fifth bowler part-time option. his role with the bat, it's again with the conditions at play. You think he's your number? Would you be picking him at number 6, Nick, if there were any other players available to Sri Lanka in the squad?
I've got to say, absolutely not. I don't want to call out Dhananjaya because I love him as a cricketer. I think he's been fantastic for Sri Lanka in Test match cricket over the past several years. But I had a look, and in the 8 ODIs Sri Lanka have played since the LPL, he's averaging 13.5 with the bat, striking at 65. And I mean, in terms of bowling, he's taken 3 wickets, averaging 65 with an economy rate of just a shade under 5. And on these really good pitches, I wonder whether there's a case to bring in Hemantha for Dhananjaya. And I mean, you'd say that slightly weakens the batting in theory, but he's not scoring runs anyway. And so at least maybe it gives you another wicket-taking option through those middle overs. But I think, I mean, I guess there's a broader point to be made, which is that today, Kusal and Sadira scored 230 off 166, and everyone else combined to score 100 off 135. And so, you know, if another 60, 50, 60 runs that you think that the others could have made, then, I mean, the game's well out of Pakistan's reach, isn't it? And so it just, today at least, felt like there were too many passengers in that lineup. And it was a really disappointing back end to Sri Lanka's innings. I think we were all hoping that Shanaka might have played himself into a bit of form on Saturday. And then today it just looked really scratchy again, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the big things is from Shanaka. Like, his strength is, or, you know, what makes him so valuable is he's a type of batter who can, you know, go from ball 1, which is what you need in that number 6, 7, 8 position, right? You need someone who can just come in, 10 balls to go, he starts going from ball 1. But what he's doing now, because he's probably really low on confidence, is he's trying to play himself in and he's getting stuck. And then, you know, when he manages to survive like he did against South Africa, yeah, maybe he catches up on his strike rate. But when he doesn't, he's giving you like 10 of 20 deliveries, right? Which again, with this start, and I think we had this conversation offline after the warm-ups as well. Like, on tracks like this, that middle order is really getting shown up. Yeah. That the fact that they don't fit into those kinds of roles where, I mean, you're seeing guys like David Miller batting at 6, right? And it's tough to compare someone like that with the Dhananjaya De Silva or even Dasun Shanaka right now in the form that he is. Kusal Janit's also getting a lot of criticism along with Dasun Shanaka, I know, on social media. I mean, is it fair? People were kind of baying for blood when Dimuth was playing. Get him out, get him out, get him out. Bring Kusal Janit Pereira in. And now Kusal Janit is in. He's not making runs. It's a tough call, right?
You have to feel bad for him. He's coming off of an injury. He's clearly not 100%. He's played, you know, he played that one match. No, he played 2 matches in the Asia Cup, right? I think he lasted all of 9 balls. He played 134 off 24 in the warm-up and got hurt. And he really hasn't had much game time. We can't expect him to go and play the innings we want him to play and to play it reliably. You know, if we look at Kusal Janit's record, he's never been the guy who is going to get you 5, 6 50s in a row. He's boom or bust. He's very explosive at the top, and that's why they have him in the lineup. So if you don't want Dimuth and you want KJP, you have to live with the fact that sometimes he's gonna go out for a duck. He's gonna score very little, but other times he's gonna give you that bang on start that you need to win the game. Now, the other question is, we were in a situation where even if DDS is not batting, we have a number of people who are not batting well, as Nick cited the stat about who is scoring the runs. We don't have options for people to bring in. Our extra batter was Dimuth. And I think, Estelle, you brought this up. last time, where you said we're basically carrying an extra batter to be the injury replacement for one person. There's no one we can put in here to save the day unless you want to fake an injury and have Chamika come in at 6 or 8 or something like that. But we don't have any batting cover, and I don't think we can really switch positions. Like, you could maybe put DDS at the top, but then what do you do with KJP, who bats at 6 in that case? Do you move Shanika up one and then have 5 bowlers? It's a really sticky situation. And I think it's unfair to KJP. We got to let him play himself in a bit. But it's also tough for, both Shanika and KJP are in their 30s, right? So the expectation is if you're not producing, then we can't have you in the squad.
Yeah, and I mean, it also comes down to the fact that KJP has been injured the majority of the time for the last 2 years. So has Avishka Fernando. You brought Dimut Karunaratne in for the Asia Cup. Basically, Pathum Nisaka is the only guy who's kind of regularly been in that opening position, right? And Sri Lanka haven't, in 4 years, had a consistent partner for him who they're looking at towards the World Cup. And now KJP comes in with no match practice. And to be honest, I don't know if anybody, even the medical team, is certain that he'll be able to last the entire tournament, right? With his fitness issues. So it's a really tough place, I think, preparation-wise, particularly because there were 2 T20 World Cups back-to-back. There wasn't much attention paid to the ODI setup. And that's kind of coming back to kind of bite us in the back right now. Anyway, that's the bad stuff. I think we can move on to something positive. Nick, is that the best we've seen Kusal Mendis playing, at least in limited overs cricket?
100%. 2 innings. I mean, I think he's hit 14 sixes in these 2 innings, which is just remarkable. And, I remember when I first came to Sri Lanka about 2016, 2017, right at the start of Kusal Mendis' career, there was so much excitement around him. People giving him the next in line tag, saying, he's going to go on to be another Sangakkara, another Mahela. And for a long time, that hasn't happened. And especially in white ball cricket, in ODI cricket, I think he had 200s leading into this World Cup across career that's over 100 matches. He averages in the low 30s, and he really hasn't kind of delivered on his potential. And so to see him come out, albeit on flat pitches, but with so much confidence. And I mean, on Saturday against South Africa, it looked like anything that strayed onto middle stump or leg stump, it was just going to get hit for 6, right? Regardless of length. And I mean, there was even one, I think, against Ngidi where he kind of stepped inside of it and flicked it over fine leg. An amazing shot. And then today, he was just brutal on width. I mean, we saw so many boundaries through point. He looks to be in a really rich vein of form. He looks like he can, go out and score 100 off 60 every time he's batting at the moment. And I mean, that is just, it's fantastic to see. It's really great. And I mean, one point I'd make is that this lineup, although we're saying it's got kind of problems top to bottom, it is potentially one Wanindu Hasaranga away from looking really potent, right? If you had him batting at 6 and bowling 10 overs, these two, well, maybe not the South Africa result, but we could be looking at Sri Lanka in a pretty different position right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that balance is something you can't, there's no way you make up for that, right? When you've got a player of that caliber. And that's one major thing Sri Lanka is missing, is that genuine all-rounder who you can rely on for 7, 8, maybe 10 overs with the ball, and then come into bat in the top 6. And I think Pakistan have a similar problem. Shadab Khan's form with the ball is really affecting that bowling lineup, especially with Naseem Shah missing out as well. So Hasaranga's, like, every game we watch, it seems like the hole that he's left is getting bigger and bigger. And just on Teekshana, he's suddenly finding himself having to play both roles, right? In terms of being the wicket taker and also keeping the runs down, which, I mean, again, just like Pathirana, he's also in his early 20s, he's a kid, right? But having said that, I was just going through the ages of the Sri Lankan side. Dom, 2027, is that the year for Sri Lanka? I mean, most of them now are in their early to mid 20s.
Yeah, they have the looks of a great future squad. There are a few holes, right? Who is going to open aside Potham, right? Or Avishka or whoever we have there. We have 3 and 4. They look good to go. 3, 4, 5 look good to go. And if we can slot in Hasaranga at 6, that's a heck of a, batting lineup to start with. And then I think the key is, how do we keep these young bowlers fit? How do we not let them lose confidence? Because I think this is something we see so often in Sri Lankan cricket, is there's no training ground for these kids, basically, right? They come up from school cricket effectively into international cricket. And I think it was Trevor Bayliss who said, for Sri Lanka, first-class cricket is the international scene. And so you have someone like Pathirana, who is so talented, having to figure it out on the big stage. You have Will Alagay having to figure it out on the big stage. And some days you're just going to get hammered, and there's nowhere to go to hone your craft. And in those pressure situations, like there are first class games, but it's not the same order of magnitude for the guys like Will Alagay or Pathirana. The pitches aren't prepared in a way that will help them prepare. So I think that's kind of got to be the key, is how do we keep our bowling lineup healthy, and how do we maintain the confidence that these players should have so that they can grow into those world beaters that we know they can be. I want to give a shout out to Madhushanka today. I thought he bowled really, really well. I thought that first 5-over spell, he was tremendously accurate, right on the button, took 2 wickets. He's working on those variations. You can see it in the back overs, but I think he's going to be a handful, especially in South Africa in 2027. But again, it's incumbent upon Sri Lanka as a side thinking, not how do we just win the next game that we have in front of us, but how do we actively plan for a World Cup when we have this talent, right? As you pointed out, Estelle, a young side that has some white ball power and that can win games. How do we prepare them in the right ways for success on the international stage?
Yeah, that's going to be, I think, the major challenge, particularly because if you look at kind of the cricketing landscape now with the franchise cricket competing with the international cricket and having T20 World Cups pretty much every 2 years, slowly ODI cricket is kind of being left in the fringes, right? So then preparing for tournaments like that, it's going to be really tough. But I definitely think that if it's managed properly, Sri Lanka has always had the talent. It's always been the things beyond that that's been the problem, right? Talent is there's never a shortage of talent. So this team, maybe if all goes well in the next couple of years, could be a real force. There are some holes to fill, as you said. But yeah, Nick, just a word on Sadira Samaravikrama. So many comparisons. I remember when he made his debut in 2017, everyone was talking about this guy. He's Mahela, right? Just the way he plays, the style he's got, those shots. It's almost like it's not something you can teach, right? Then left out of the team, I feel unfairly. I mean, he didn't do bad enough to have been left out for so long. He's come back and how good is it to have that number 4 walks in and you think, okay, you know what, this guy's gonna make it safe for us.
It's superb, and he adds so much solidity and stability to Sri Lanka's lineup, right? Because he's a guy who, I think we saw it a few times during the Asia Cup on tougher pitches, and now we're seeing it in abundance here in India, that he can strike at 100 without looking like he's taking risks or trying to smack the leather off the ball. and he just, I mean, he rotates strikes so well, and he plays lovely shots, right? I mean, a few times over the past few months, I've seen him cover drive balls off the seamers, kind of off a really good length that just are superb. And today, I think it was against Mo Nawaz that he got well outside of leg stump and hit that inside out cover drive for 6. He's a great player, and I feel a bit sorry for him that he's playing in this era where ODI cricket has kind of taken a back seat, because it looks to be clearly his best format, right? But yeah, as you guys both point out, I think things are looking really promising for 2027. Him and Kusal are still going to be there. So's Charith and Pathum. And then I'm really excited about Kruspule and Siobhan Daniel as potential kind of more combustive openers. So I think if everything goes right over the next 4 years, Sri Lanka are going to be in a really good spot heading into the 2027 tournament, and have kind of competition for places, which I guess we haven't seen with the batting lineup really in the past cycle.
Yeah, I think the only
that's.
Oh, go ahead, Estelle.
Go ahead now.
You
go ahead. That's
the
fine.
only question is, where are we going to find that power down the lineup? Because I think, Estelle, you rightly said there's no lack of talent in Sri Lanka. We produce so many top order batters that's one of the problem. 1 through 4, we could fill 3 teams with decent guys, but it's that 5, 6, 7 slot. How do you bat towards the back end of a 20 over match or finishing a 50 over match? So cultivating that particular talent is something that they would do well to kind of look into over the next few years, because and Mark would be proud of us for bringing this up, but the LPL has done really well in producing more aggressive Sri Lankan players. The one thing we haven't seen it produce is the guy who can kind of smack it around at the end of an innings to give an impetus, leaving aside Hasaranga. And we were messaging, how nice would it be if we had an informed Bonica coming in at 6? He would almost be the kind of perfect. I've always thought of him as a Sri Lankan David Miller, left-handed, just this sort of natural timer of the ball. But that's another question for another day.
Yeah, Banukas, I think he's going to remain a big what if in Sri Lanka cricket, right? Because he's obviously talented, so obviously talented. But, whether it's that he's not got opportunities, whether it's his fitness, whatever it is, something is always keeping him out of the scene. Disappointing, really, because, I mean, like I said, he's such a talented player. Just looking ahead to the tournament, in my mind, I felt like South Africa, Pakistan are two teams that Sri Lanka could potentially beat. Like if Sri Lanka were to make it to the semis, they'd obviously have to win the 3 games against Afghanistan, Bangladesh, and the Netherlands. And then maybe South Africa and Pakistan are the next 2 teams who they might have the best chance against. That has not gone Sri Lanka's way. Game 1, we conceded the highest total in ODI World Cups. In Game 2, we conceded the highest successful run chase in the ODI World Cup. So hasn't gone well. Next up is Australia. Nick, what do we have to do differently there? Because batting first hasn't worked, bowling first hasn't worked either.
It's going to be really tough, isn't it? Australia on Monday or Tuesday, is it? And I mean, they're going to be out for blood, having lost their first game. I thought, India made kind of light work on that chase, but had Mitchell Marsh held on to that Kohli catch early, I thought it could have been an entirely different story. I think probably we got to hope that we play them on a flat pitch, and that the batting just fires. I think it's really tough. I mean, and I was saying to Dom before we came on that it's starting to look like a really long tournament now, isn't it? Because you're just thinking, how does Sri Lanka win games if they're playing like this? And I mean, today it kind of felt with the bowling, definitely in the back half of the innings, that like Thikshana was the only guy they could turn to, and everyone else was just going for runs. And then, as you said, Estelle, like that he was changing the way he bowled. He wasn't bowling as many off breaks, right? He was just kind of skidding it in because he felt like he had to be the one who was building dot balls. I think Australia are a really potentially dangerous side, but I guess the one good thing is that they haven't really fired yet. And you've got Smith and Labuschagne at 3 and 4 who aren't the most explosive players. Alex Carey isn't in the best touch, and we haven't actually seen that many runs from Maxwell and Green recently. I also didn't think that Zampa looked that threatening against India yesterday, was it? Sunday rather. So I mean, we'll see, but it's going to be a long shot. I think now Sri Lanka have really just got to hope that, I mean, we have to beat Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Netherlands, and then hope that maybe get one other result somewhere. But something has to click, doesn't it?
Yeah, just like I was thinking the same thing about it seeming like a really long tournament now. When you think about, okay, Sri Lanka have 7 more games to go, right? And where is that? Because, okay, Thikshana didn't play the first game. So we are thinking, okay, no, when he comes into the side, obviously the bowling is going to be a lot more formidable. Now, basically, we're playing a full strength, right? This game. And I felt like, I don't know if you guys would agree, but this loss was far more demoralizing than the South Africa one. 100%. Even though they got 400 there, this one just felt like there, I think we left it on a positive note because the batting was good. But here, the bowling just looked absolutely toothless at certain points, right? Yeah, so Dom, any predictions for next Monday, Australia to come?
You know, I think one thing that maybe Nick mentioned hoping for a flat pitch. I'm maybe hoping for a slower, lower pitch. Lucknow, at least they relayed the pitch, I think, last year, and the IPL saw some very low scores in Lucknow. So it's supposed to be the venue for turn. Whether it will be, we don't know, given how flat the pitches have been so far. So that would be at least somewhat of an advantage to us because it would give us more bowlers to use effectively. I think, and also Australia is basically bowling spin with Zampa and Maxwell. And I think given the form that Mendes and Sadira are in, they can give a lot of trouble to Australia in the middle overs. So I would say not all hope is lost just yet. And of course, you know, it's a long tournament. Upsets can happen. We just need a few results to go one way or another. And as it's looking right now, South Africa look very, very good. Pakistan, I don't know where to put them. Very hard to know because I think with both Sri Lanka and Pakistan, I would have said their bowling is their strong suit coming into the tournament. But it's not been the case. And their batting, which, you know, might be thought to be lacking a little bit, has been stronger. So who knows?
Yeah, I think we can leave it at that for today. So thanks everyone for watching. Mark will be back next time to take over the hosting duties. Before you guys go, don't forget, we've got the podcast out. You can subscribe, share, please, and tell everyone who's interested in Sri Lanka cricket about it, as well as the newsletter. I think we'll have another newsletter out on Friday. If you just sign up, you can get the newsletter right into your inbox, so you don't have to worry about looking for it after that. Yeah, so thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you next week.